Some background noise.
Publication, promotion, production, distribution. Okay. All right.
We're live.
All right.
Good evening. Welcome to On Another Level Book Club, Author Babble, where we're getting up close and personal with author Khefa Nosakhere and also Mr. Angelo Flemming. Nosakere is the author of Institutional Racism and the Search for American Masculinity and Identity in the selected work of Richard Wright. Mr. Nosakere and Mr. Flemming, thank you for joining us on this evening.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Likewise, thank you for having me.
Okay, so let's start with Mr. Flemming. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. So I've been in corporate America as a senior manager for about 20 years. My background is all in software development, technical project management, and also have a few entrepreneurial pursuits. So I've, been in those corporate meetings where I'm the only Black person. And I've had to deal with some of that nonsense.
That's understandable. So, Mr. Nosakere, tell us about yourself.
I am a native of New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm a graduate of the University of Southern California. And I have just released my first nonfiction book, which found its origin in my master's thesis. I'm the oldest of four from a single female-headed household, and I worked my way through USC. And so that's my little nugget,
Impressive. So today we're here to talk about your book, Institutional Racism and the Search of African American Masculinity and Identity in Selected Work of Richard Wright. So, purpose of us bringing on another male author to kind of balance the scales, due to the polarized writing that we have going on currently, we thought this would be a great time to kind of open the floor and look at things that are going on in society from both sides of the coin. Thank you, Mr. Flemming, for joining us on this evening. Thank you, Mr. Nosakere. So tell us, where did the notion of this book come about, Mr. Nosakere?
Well, if you type in Black masculinity in Google, you might be surprised at what you see. And I tell my students that if you don't define yourself and you allow someone else to define you, you ain't gonna like what they say. There are very few Black men in America, at least, who discuss what Black masculinity is. And so as I grew up, to answer your question directly, the reason the title's so long is because I had to find a unique subject. So in academia, they want something unique, something that has not been discussed before. And it came to my attention that Richard Wright is criminally underappreciated when most people begin and end with native son, and that is so unfair to his legacy. And so he wrote several things. I'll tell anyone that listens that if you read anything by Richard Wright and Malcolm X and James Baldwin, those three, no one wrote with more raw pain and focus about white male supremacy than those three. And if you know anything about Richard Wright only lived to be 53 years old. He had an incredible amount of intellectual and academic output. He was a journalist. He was a mentor. That story has not been told, and I plan to tell that story.
Okay.
So I decided that I needed to discuss Black masculinity. And I say two things. What is it? What is Black masculinity? And probably more importantly, who should define it? And so I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, and I say I've been a fan of Richard Wright since high school. Black Boy is one of my favorite novels ever. And I'm sure we'll get more into that. But let me cross over, Mr. Flemming.
Yes, ma'am.
What is your definition of Black masculinity?
You know, before coming across Khefa's work, I really hadn't thought about it in those. I really hadn't given much thought to it. But, you know, I'm raising a 14-year-old son, and for me to answer that, I would have to kind of think of what kind of man would I want him to be when he grows up. And, you know, I would want him to be someone that is loving and caring, but also strong enough to weather the types of things that we have to deal with in America as a Black man. So it's kind of like I think of how are things now and how do I want things to be? And I want him to be a combination of those things. So I still haven't given you a straight answer, but I want him to be strong. I want him to be loving and caring, but also, and this might sound a bit intolerant, but I don't want him wearing dresses, because we have a lot of male figures that are wearing dresses, and I don't have anything against people that are gay or queer or, you know, however you want to define it, but I think that you can still be masculine and love another man romantically. I don't think you have to be feminine to, you know, if you swing that way, I don't think you have to be feminine to love someone or to express your love that way. You know, I want him to be masculine, but not, I guess, to the point where it's toxic.
Gotcha. Okay. Mr. Nosakere, what would be your definition of masculinity?
When I was during my undergrad, I was a co-founder of the Brotherhood of African Men, which was an African rites of passage program. And so a cultural and simple definition of Black masculinity is when a Black boy undergoes a rites of passage to gain the title of man.
Okay.
And as we discussed in Things Fall Apart in West African society before we were kidnapped and brought here, that's what we did. We had rites of passage.
What are some of the things that would be involved in rites of passage?
Part of it would be physical, mental, and military training, martial arts, meditation. It would be a curriculum that reflects Black culture before colonialism, before we were poisoned and diluted by them.
So could I put that in my own words?
Absolutely. That's why I put it out there.
All right. So I heard knowledge of self, discipline, and
yes, sir.
being able to be a protector.
Yes, sir. That's it. That's it. That's
Okay.
it.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. So looking at the definition that the consensus definition we just come up with, what are some of the things that our Black boys are fighting against, or what are some of the things that families, adults, dad, moms are fighting against in trying to provide this rite of passage for young men?
Well, if you look at our condition in this country, if you look at different movies, that has the conscious brother. Hollywood portrays, if you are Hispanic and you are proud of your culture, that's great. If you're Asian and you're proud of Asian culture, that's awesome. If you're a woman and you support women's issues, that's great. But if you're black and you support black culture, you're a nut or an extremist.
Yeah,
So
a radical.
we are fighting decades. We're fighting an invention that the smallest group of people created to stop them from mating with the rest of the world. Okay, racism is an invention that has two main purposes. The first was for them to get mineral wealth because they have none, and the second was to stop them from freely mating with people of color, because if they do, they won't exist anymore. Right. So that's what we're fighting. That's the mental. That's what Dr. Carter G. Woodson was talking about when he said, when he talked about our miseducation is here. So we are fighting what Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, she said, white male supremacy is the most destructive invention in the known universe.
So true. So true.
One of the things you said in your, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
Angelo, you want to come in? Did you want to come in on what he said?
No, it just seems like it's more of a mental battle that we're fighting than anything else, and sometimes it manifests as physical, with the police brutality and killings, but really it's what I just heard it makes me think is more of a mental battle.
Yes, sir. When I talk to my students about the history, human history over the last 400 years, when they came to Africa and they saw the wealth of Africa and they said to themselves, we can't kill all of them. We can't shoot them all. We need some help. We need them to help us. And you see that manifesting itself in our behavior to this day, unfortunately. You see it. And so earlier, when I was asked, well, what is the main thing we are fighting? We are fighting to reestablish and this is a mouthful. We are fighting to reestablish the nuclear black family. That's mama, daddy, Jamal, and Latifah. We're fighting. You have people, too many people are saying it's okay to have two daddies. It's okay to have two mommies. We need to get back to what made us strong. And what made us strong was a traditional nuclear black family.
Okay, so I have a question for you. So one of the things in your book that you mentioned, you said that recently I've had extremely disturbing conversations with a small handful of African-American males that have expressed some views about historic events that shook you to your core. One of them was that African kings were responsible for the slave trade. And two was black on black crime is the number one problem of the black community. And you said that that shook you to your core. Why is that?
Well, you have heard, I call it the victims, it's called the victims complex. If a woman is raped, or a woman who has been the victim of domestic violence, and she'll say, oh, it was my fault, I provoked him. No, it wasn't your fault. So there was one brother in particular who said that, and I quote, African kings were responsible for the slave trade, and black on black crime is our biggest problem. I hear that a lot. Mm-hmm. So if you are black and you think that, you have to ask yourself, who does that benefit? It benefits somebody. It benefits them tremendously. In another group, it hurts them tremendously if you think that.
Mm-hmm. Right, and so, it's actually incorrect. Right. If you look at Department of Justice statistics, black on black crime and white on white crime is within 1.5% of each other.
So the actual, when you read that from the introduction, that's actually is something that happened to me, something that I heard, and it ended a 30-year friendship.
Wow.
Okay. I tell people that so you can get the gravity of those two statements. Black on black crime is our biggest problem. And so when I heard that, I told the brother, I said, listen, do we redline against ourselves? Do we own the prison populations? Pardon me, the prison corporations?
Right.
Do we control the insurance industry? Do we control the banking industry? So to say that black on black crime is our biggest problem is intellectually lazy. It's refusing to confront a group of people who benefit from it. It just gets me upset whenever I think about it.
Especially when it doesn't exist. The Department of the DOJ crime statistics, black on black crime is not any more of an issue than white on white crime. It's within 1.5% of each other.
But who controls the media? Who controls what we see? Who controls what we read? Who shapes that narrative? Who?
Right.
So we get back to that. We get right back to institutional racism.
Right.
Who controls organizations? Who controls policy? Who shapes people's ideas?
So what do you say to? Oh,
go ahead,
Sharon. So what do you say to people when you're in a conversation or you are just hearing people, especially now, right now, in the climate that we're currently in, and people are saying, because I've read Facebook posts and I've heard people just say different things about they're tired of Black Lives Matter. They are tired of Black people feeling like that, claiming that they've been so wrongly. I forgot the word. It was one word someone said, but they're basically saying that, well, if we walked around saying white lives matter, it would be a big problem. If we walked around and said that we were going to have a white chamber of commerce, it would be a problem. If we said that we were going to have a white hair salon, it would be a problem. He says, but when somebody says that we have a Black hair salon, or there's a Black chamber of commerce, or there Black lives matter, nobody gets upset about it. And so what would you say to that? Because one of the things you said in your book, and you said what we need to discuss are the conditions that brought about that formation. So, and I think somebody did finally respond to one of the posts and told her, said, well, if there has not been a history of racism, and if there was not a history of systemic racism and something else, we wouldn't have the need to have a Black chamber of commerce. If there weren't biases being shown to white people against Black people, there wouldn't be a need to say this or say that. And so, and I think that goes to your point about it. We need to discuss more of the conditions that brought us to forming these things, as opposed to the actual Black Lives Matter. What brought us to this point? What got us to this point to have to say that Black Lives Matter?
A few years ago, there was an article that stated that in order for Black wealth to match white wealth, it would take 226 years. Let that sink in for a second. Just for a second. So when you think about chattel slavery was about a small group of people. At first, they thought America had gold, but when they realized it didn't, and it had fertile land, you need people to work that land. And in order to maximize a profit, you have to pay them little or nothing. Historians call slavery the peculiar institution. And the reason they call it the peculiar institution, slavery in some form or another has always been with us ever since the earliest human interactions. But the reason what happened to us was unique, because We were told we were worth nothing. We were told we were ugly. We were told we were stupid. We were told we were shiftless. In Russia, the serfs worked the land. In ancient Europe, there was debtor prison. There have been other forms of servitude, but our servitude was unique, and we are still paying for that. Too many of our people still believe that we are ugly. They still hate themselves. They hate Africa. They don't want any part of that. Where did this come from? Who taught us? Malcolm X said in Los Angeles in 1963, he gave a speech at a Baptist church. He said, "Who taught you how to hate yourself? Who benefits from us saying black on black crime is our biggest problem?" So I have a dear aunt, and she sees a little brother on the corner selling drugs, but she didn't see who supplied him.
Right.
I remind her of that. I said, "Titi, we don't own no planes. We don't own no boats. We don't have no Colombian hookup. There's so many things that happen before you see what you see on the corner.
Right.
And what you see, you're reacting to what you see, but what you don't see is incredible."
Right.
And so we as a people, the first thing that we have to do is that we have to understand that slavery was economic. Chattel slavery was the worst event in human history because there was nothing like it. And that's why historians call American slavery the peculiar institution. And so you have, I've seen it myself, and it usually affects sisters more than it affects brothers. You have beautiful, dark-skinned black women who think they're ugly.
Right.
That's a tragedy. No one else, no other group no other member of the human family told another group, "You are ugly, you are worthless," until the 1700s. If you look, modern day racism, modern day white male supremacy was formed in the 1700s because they said to themselves, we need a way to separate. We need to separate ourselves, and we need them to not challenge us. How do we do that?
Break them down.
Right.
And so you can see the evidence to this day that they did such a powerful job in teaching us how to hate ourselves that, people like me, I'm considered, I've been called a militant. I've been called many things, right? But we always get back to, we always have to get back to, how do we get to this point? And in order to discuss that, we have to go back to the 1700s. We have to talk about when America was founded, their initial disappointment that gold was not plentiful, and they found farmland, they found land that needed to be worked. And so, unfortunately, that set the tone for what we call the transatlantic slave trade. When the transatlantic slave trade happened, there was a time when 500 years earlier, it wouldn't have happened because the West African militaries were so powerful. But over a period of time, they diminished, and that's when they came in. Okay, so it's like a perfect storm that brought about the transatlantic slave trade, and the impact is what we are talking about to this very day.
Right. So let's go back to the fact that you said that it would take 226 years for the black people to have the wealth of the white people have. So how does that tie into what you mentioned in your book about working poor?
So in America, you always hear about the top 1%, right? What I did was I looked at the top 10%, and in each state, there's an income threshold. So the way wealthy white people earn their money from dividends, they don't work. Okay, they have access to resources that the four of us do not.
Exactly.
All right. They have the opposite of generational poverty is generational wealth.
Exactly.
You don't work for that. 2 years ago, the T-Mobile CEO was given $66 million. I'm not a mathematician, but you don't earn $66 million. And there's a cutoff. You could probably earn 80 grand or 90 grand maybe. But after you surpass a certain amount, you don't earn that. It's given to you.
Given to you. Right.
And so when we look at generational wealth and generational poverty, we have to talk about how racism is economic. It always was. It used to be more psychological and more social when they cared about that. But now their focus is much, much more economic. They're okay with us having Black Pride if we don't unify and recycle the black dollar.
Right.
So it's generational.
Okay. While we're talking, I don't want to miss this because I think it interjects well with what we're talking about. Latice Phillips in our audience asks, is it safe to say that Black on Black crime is a contributing factor in the distribution of Black communities?
Could you repeat that, please?
Yes, she says, is it safe to say that Black on Black crime is a contributing factor in the distribution of Black communities?
I'm not quite sure. I guess what she's trying to say is Black on Black crime an equal problem in different communities? I'm not quite sure.
Latice, could you give us some clarity on that? Distribution, but
so I don't know what she means when she says distribution of. I think she could word that differently.
Destruction. Oh,
destruction. Okay, destruction of the Black community.
Okay, so here we are again. We're talking about Black on Black crime. Okay, but we're not talking about the fact that Black business does not get. We're not at the table when the real money is distributed. Jeff Bezos' ex-wife gave an HBCU, I think $160 million. There's actually a problem with that. We're relying on the kindness of a stranger when the federal government we pay tax dollars, but they don't treat HBCUs the way that they treat my alma mater.
Right.
So we're still talking about Black on Black crime. We're not talking about supporting Black businesses to the level that we need to.
Right.
You know, we have to stop killing ourselves. But if we keep talking about Black on Black crime, we're not talking about the real problems that create Black on Black crime. Poor people prey on each other.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, Black on Black crime is very close to the same rate of white on white crime. So it really doesn't even have to be a discussion point. You know, there's always going to be people that are committing crime. And if the ratio of Black and white crime, Black on Black and white on white is very, very similar, then it's not really an issue for our community. It's no different than in any other community. Right.
But again, so let me ask you guys, and I know we said this earlier, but because I'm not going to say people, because we as a people keep saying that Black on Black crime is one of our problems. We have been conditioned to say that. We have been conditioned to think that because of what the media says, instead of getting in and getting our own statistics, looking at our real factual data that would negate that statement. we keep repeating the statement. We keep perpetuating that lie.
It reminds me of when certain white athletes had a problem with Colin Kaepernick, and they said we don't want to disrespect the flag. Listen, black on black crime. We have to stop killing ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We got to stop preying on each other.
Right.
But whenever we're talking about black on black crime, and we're not talking about HBCUs being properly funded, we're not talking about black boys having Pop Warner in Little League, we're not talking about the our generational poverty, we're doing ourselves a disservice.
I agree
we're
with
doing
you.
ourselves, pardon me, those persons who are talking about black on black crime are doing themselves a tremendous disservice, because what you are seeing the frustration of our poverty, you are seeing our ignorance, you are seeing that ingrained black hate. That's what you are seeing. But if we keep talking about black on black crime, and we don't talk about prison populations and how they get penalized if there's 90% capacity,
right?
That's not a good discussion to have. It's not.
Yeah, and I prefer to talk about solutions instead of problems. I don't want to be problem focused. I want to be solution focused.
Mm-hmm.
So over the years, I'm a huge advocate of Black love, Black culture. And what does that mean? So most of my adult life happened in Los Angeles. And I noticed that different ethnicities pool their money, different ethnicities pool together. Mm-hmm. There's a reason we don't. I touched on that earlier.
Right.
Every group in America came here of their own free will, except for one.
Us.
Every group in America knows their great grandfathers. They know their original language. They know their culture. One group was cut off from that. And we wonder why we can't unify. We wonder why we can't get it together the way that others can. And so if we're talking about solutions, Brother Flemming talked about his son and what type of man he wants his son to be. We need to get back to our culture, African rites of passage, self-determination, cooperative economics. We have to get back to respecting and protecting the Black woman, the things that we did before colonialism.
Right. So we have to find that common bond.
Yeah, right. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Okay. Sharon?
I'm sorry, I'm taking notes. So again, being solution oriented, what you said was a lot, but at the community level, what are some steps that our viewers can take in moving in that direction, getting back?
I think the first step is mental. Challenging some self-defeating attitudes that I hear all the time. We are our biggest problem. Okay.
So are you talking about negative self-talk?
Yes, sir. Self-defeating behavior. Yeah. We can do little things like forming together to buy in bulk, instead of avoiding retail. We can talk about supporting Black farmers. We can tell in Los Angeles there's a program called Recycling the Black Dollar. There's Buy the Block. We could buy an abandoned building and create a health clinic.
Right.
There's many. I can keep going. Right. We need to understand what happened to us. We need to heal that before we can come together and understand what we need to do in a capitalist society. We need to understand who we are. Mm-hmm. And a part of that with our men is understanding what Black masculinity is and what it's not, and who defines it. So every group, as I said earlier, it's great when a Hispanic man embraces his culture. Women are applauded when they are advocates for women's rights, so on and so forth. But when a Black man seeks to do anything or say anything that is supportive of self and kind, we got a problem.
Yeah.
You know?
Like they labeled you militant.
So right, I'm a militant. So, you know.
And one of the things that I think is very important is just education. You know, they say, you've heard the term over and over again, if you want to keep something from us, put it in a book.
Put it in a book. Actually, sister, the saying is, if you want to keep something from a Black man, put it in a book.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there it is, you know, on trial, you know.
Exactly.
I heard that when I was in elementary school. All right. You want to keep something from a Black man, put it in a book.
So, out of curiosity, what are your thoughts about Ghana welcoming the African diaspora home?
It's funny you mentioned Ghana. There are 3,000 brothers and sisters from the United States who have repatriated, and we also repatriate to Ethiopia. I have actually listened to some of the personal stories. I think it's wonderful. There have been the 70s or in the 60s, different ideas floated of us concentrating in one state, like the Mormons did in Utah, like the Cubans do in Florida. But to answer your question, I think it's great that brothers and sisters decide to go back home. You know, they don't want to deal with this. I've heard a lot of brothers who were in the military who have been around the world, and they say, I don't want to come back here. So what we deal with, Black people here, Dr. Joyce DeGruy said, she calls it post-traumatic slave syndrome. The stress, the mental stress that we are under to this day is incredible. Yeah. There was a sister who was a high power, I forget her name now, but she was a high power CEO. She earned millions of dollars. They were at some hotel, they were at a convention, and someone mistook her for a caterer. You know, I know you guys heard the story of Oprah. She was in London and she wanted to buy a purse. She wanted to see a purse that was $40,000, and the girl didn't know who she was. And she said, "Oh, you can't afford that." I know you heard that story.
Mm-hmm, we did.
So the sister typed in another question. I've seen other races in Los Angeles buy a house. Several families stay there and combine their funds until everyone owns a house. How can we create this type of unity in our own community? So I think the short answer to that question is there are people, I'll use myself for an example. There's people that I've known for 30 years that I went to undergraduate with that, you know, trust is not an issue. You pool these, you get together a group, you pool your resources, you have a contract, you have an understanding in place. You do it with those that you love. You do it with those that you know, and that it is being done. It's not being done to the level that we see other ethnicities do it, but it is being done.
And it's funny that she asked.
I keep getting back to, we have to understand what happened to us, why it happened. Most Black people that I talk to in my life, in my walk, they don't understand. They don't understand the depth of what we lost. They don't. They don't understand. Africa is the wealthiest landmass on earth, bar none. Whatever landmass is second is a distant second. So if you think about it, when you think about colonialism, you think about slavery, you think about everything that's going on right now, it all makes sense. You know, even though that I have 2 degrees in English, history might be my favorite subject because it answers all of our questions of today.
Right.
If you ask me, well, Kef, why is Donald Trump in office? We have to go back to the failure of the Democratic Party in 2015 to answer that question.
Right.
We have to go back. I can't give you an answer. We have to go back if I want to give you a good answer.
Right.
Good point.
Good point.
We have another question here from Latif Phillips.
No, we already answered that one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So we've talked about Black masculinity. We've talked about institutional racism, and we brought it back to today. If there was one thing that you could leave with our audience that you would want them to get out of everything you said today, what would that be?
I have to resist the temptation to say, buy the book.
No, you can say that though.
No. I said I had to resist the temptation. Our ancestors said, know thyself. Know thyself. And you know thyself. There's books that I can name: the autobiography of Malcolm X, the ISIS Papers, Africa, Mother of Western Civilization by Dr. Yusuf bin Yaqanan, affectionately known as Doc Ben. Know thyself. If you know yourself, you love yourself, no one can tell you that you are nothing. And I am convinced that our biggest all of our problems come from our lack of love of self. That's why we kill each other. That's why certain sisters don't believe that they are beautiful. It's why we have the mental and intellectual and psychic stress that we are under, because we Black people are operating under false information.
Right.
It's like you can't escape it. You just can't.
Okay. So, Angelo, if you had one thing that you would like to leave with our audience, what would you say? What would it be?
I wish you wouldn't ask me just one thing. I have 2 things.
Okay, well, give us 2 things then.
The first thing that I would say, which is probably the most important, is a lot of us, as Kef said, are dealing with stress that sometimes we don't even realize because we've dealt with that all of our lives and we think that is normal. So I would say you have to have something that helps you to deal with stress. So I would say start a meditation practice or start a yoga practice. And then the second thing that I would say is that, this is a conversation I had with my 14-year-old son. There's 4 ways of earning income. You can be an employee, you can be self-employed, you can own a business, or you can be an investor. And traditionally, as African Americans, we shy away from the stock market. And we do. One of the things that we have to do if we really want that generational wealth, and also if we want the wealth that was made off of our backs, it's all in the stock market. The values of those companies and those families that have made money off of us through slavery, it's all in the stock market. So we have to learn financial literacy and specifically how to invest in stocks, options, and other financial instruments.
Absolutely, I agree. I agree. Okay, so this has been a great discussion. So I want to turn it a little bit. Sharon, you got anything to say before I turn this right quick?
No, good. Go ahead.
Okay, before I turn this, so we know that you are a self-published. Are you self-published?
Yes.
Self-published author. So that means that you have had to do everything.
Yes.
And one of the things I saw on the Goodreads that you had written, it says a successful book must follow four distinct stages according to publishing guru Dan Pointer. One, creation; two, publishing; three, distribution; and four, promotion. A lot of our audience, not only are they just readers, but they're also authors. So, as a self-published author, what can you share with other authors? Um, what can you share with other authors that will help them in their self-publishing journey? Because a lot of them are self-publishing. So, what would you say to them? What could you say to them that would be helpful to them?
First, I would say that you need to put together a team because you can't do everything by yourself. And if you try to, that won't turn out very well.
Right.
You need a plan. You need to know who your audience is and where they are. You need to have a schedule and a focus, and you don't want to deviate from that. But it's about putting together a team, knowing where your audience is, who your audience is, and where are they, and what is the best way to find them. And if you can do those things, you will be successful.
Okay, that's good tip. Good tip. I don't want to leave this question hanging out there. Latisse posted another question, and she said, "I understand there is nothing new under the sun, but today's generation face issues we've never faced. 5 and 7-year-old kids attempting suicide. Teaching them our heritage is key, but how will it aid them in today's society?"
You know, I didn't mention this, but I have experienced teaching in quote unquote inner city high schools. And I had to spend an inordinate amount of time convincing my students that I care about them.
Right.
So when I'm interviewed and I'm asked, what is a story that stands out? That's something that I did to show there was a young man that I had. If you guys remember, a few years ago, the NFL made a half-hearted attempt to get the Washington Redskins to change their mascot, and I picked a story because in the class I had a lot of the athletes, and so one young man he refused to write the essay. I got upset. I told him get out. So the next morning, he comes in and I said, "What's wrong, man?" And he said, "My mama is HIV positive and she's living in her car." And I told him, I said, "No 17-year-old should have to deal with that." And so I said, "This is what your final is going to be. You're going to do three things. You're going to find your mama treatment. You're going to find her job training. And you're going to find her an apartment." So he sat at my desk. I gave him my cell phone. I have a background in the nonprofit world, so I knew who to call. I gave him the phone, right? And sure enough, he found his mother an apartment. He found her a job training program, and he found her treatment.
Wow.
Okay. So the quote unquote bad kids, when I got in their face and I would tell them, "Listen, I understand you don't want to write this essay, but you're only hurting yourself." So we're talking about young people. We have to show these young people that we care. When I tell my students I'm the oldest of four from a single female head of household, my mama was a high school dropout, and I worked 30 hours a week to put myself through USC. You could hear there's no sounds in the room. Okay. So when I tell my students my background, when I tell them of what I went when I was in the ninth grade, I didn't go to the graduation because I didn't have a suit. Okay. I know what it's like. All right. And so when those kids, when they hear my story, you know, they can't tell me they're not going to do their work.
Mhm.
So if the sister's talking about our young people, the answer to her question is we have to show how much we love our young people. We have to show them a way. You know, I remember once when I taught in the Houston Independent School District, and the assistant we had we were in line. They treated the teachers for breakfast, and I never forget. Coach Johnson looks at me. He says, "Why are you here?" And I told him, "Because I want to be here." You know, and what he was saying is, so you go to this really expensive school. Why are you at Madison High School? Because I want to be and I need to be.
Mhm.
So when I left Madison High School, a lot of my kids are still in my life. I impacted those young people because they knew I cared about them.
Mhm.
All right. So the stories, the kids that wouldn't do their work, they did it for me. They did it for me because they knew my story.
Right.
And they couldn't say, you don't understand what I'm going through. Oh, I understand, bro. And this
Right.
is what I did. Well, if you don't do your work, you're making your problems worse. It ain't gonna get better. You're gonna make it worse.
Right.
I will show you where to get resources. I'll show you how to, to deal with your pride. So that's what we need to do. Our young people need love. They need to be shown that we care. They need. Listen to this. A lot of these problems, we didn't have these problems when we had the traditional nuclear black family. If you look at these little boys with all of this hair and the feminization of these little boys, if you look at a lot of what's going on with these kids, as this sister's talking about 7-year-olds who just don't see a better way. I think they look around and they see the confusion. They see no structure at home. It gets back to the traditional nuclear black family, the black church, our leaders. We need to refocus on rebuilding the traditional nuclear black family. That would take care of a lot of our problems.
Okay. Any other questions? Do we have any other questions out there? Sharon, you have any comments? I think she's frozen. Again, I think she's frozen. Yep, she's frozen. All right. All right. Do we have any other questions from our viewers, our audience today? All right. So tell our audience where they can purchase your book. Now you can hold your book up. Where they can purchase your book, where they can get more information about you and your bodies of work.
So the short answer to your question is Amazon. If you go to Google and you type in Khefa Nosakhere, Khefa Nosakhere, the first thing that comes up, I believe, is the Amazon.
Yes.
My author page, and then you'll see my interviews. You'll see the fiction books. I have a fiction book called America the Beautiful. It's set 50 years in the future. America is experiencing the second Great Depression. Wall Street has failed, and a black army general saves the country.
Okay.
So that's America the Beautiful. And what inspired me to write America the Beautiful was when I started reading about the top 10%.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, Google. I tell people it's like a catchphrase now. Google me, Khefa Nosakhere, Khefa Nosakhere.
Sorry.
Google me.
And for those who may not have caught that, it is scrolling at the bottom of our screen.
Yes.
All right. So we thank you, Mr. Nosakere, and we thank you, Mr. Flemming, for tonight's conversation, which I think was very right on time. We needed that. We need to continue having this conversation. We need to continue engaging our African American men in these conversations and women, because for me, it helps me to hear from you guys about how you feel and what you think about certain things. So this was, I think tonight was a great conversation. Sharon, I've taken over your show.
I do have a question. I don't know if this has been asked. Do you have anything else in the works that we can expect?
Yes, my next nonfiction book, the title is Charmed, I'm Sure, The Black Male's Guide to Success in America.
Okay.
Okay,
And
interesting.
I tell my young people the most important decision, Mr. Flemming, Brother Flemming, the most important decision your 14-year-old can make is what does he want to do for a living?
Right.
In a capitalist society, the most important decision you can make if you're a black male is what do you want to do for a living? And here's why. It's not your religion, because I've seen thousands of homeless Christians. It's what you want to do for a living, because you're going to spend more time doing that than anything else. So you better be happy doing it.
Yeah.
This is true.
Actually, that's what's on my whiteboard. We were planning out his life.
Mm-hmm.
You said his life.
Yeah.
Charmed, I'm Sure, is a book where I talk about my struggle. I talk about what I did to address and to overcome my obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm thinking that by next year, and what it is, Charmed, I'm Sure, is going to be geared towards single moms raising black boys by themselves. Okay. And I talk about ways that single moms can surround their boys with positive brothers where they are. You know, they're there. There's certain attitudes that black women have that they need to address, you know.
What might that be?
Well, you know,
Ooh, you can restart something now.
no, I grew up in the black community. I know what to say and what not to say.
All right now.
Let me just say this to you.
Yes, go ahead.
I am a product, okay, of this reality that succeeded from it. So I'm an expert in that regard. So earlier we talked about our pain, we talked about our degradation, we talked about those things. We talked about solutions. And so for black mothers that are doing it by themselves, by the way, there's many that I know personally. And these sisters need to understand that there is help. They need to understand where to find it and who to talk to. And a lot of times when they don't access these resources, it's their pride. They don't know how to say, Kef, can you help me? Okay. And this is from them. This isn't from me. All right. So more of our sisters who are raising boys by themselves need to humble themselves and say, I need help. Okay. And this is from what I have seen. This is not my ego. This is from what I have seen with my own two eyes. That the moms doing it by themselves, a lot of times they have an attitude, I can raise him how to be a boy, a man. No, you can't. The great Winnie Mandela couldn't have done it. And I think she was hard as hell. I had great respect for Winnie Mandela, but she couldn't teach a little boy how to be a man. Right. And women, black women have to stop saying that. They have to stop saying that. And they have to stop thinking that. You know, right. I'll leave it at that. But
okay.
Charmed, I'm Sure, The Black Male's Guide to Success in America. That'll be with 3 Ks. Will be my way. It'll be, I'm not a Christian, but it's going to be my ministry. It'll be my way of giving back. And that when I talk to black women raising boys by themselves, I will give those little brothers a roadmap. There's something called a career interest inventory test. You answer 100 questions,
Mm-hmm.
and they give you five careers that fit your interests.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about goal setting. I talk about a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day goal. I talk about financial literacy. I talk about the difference between, I tell my kids, job, J-O-B stands for just over broke.
Cool.
That's a good one.
So this is my next project, Charmed, I'm sure. The Black Male's Guide to Success in America. I think it's going to be, it'll be tremendous. It'll be my way of continuing to give back, not only just to the little brothers, but to those sisters that are doing it by themselves.
Uh-huh.
Awesome.
Okay. We're looking forward to that.
All right. Well, we don't have any more questions from our audience. And I think this is a good point for us to end our conversation tonight. Again, we thank you both for joining us. This has been a great conversation. And we're going to have you back when your next book is out, Charmed, I'm sure. And we'll be glad to have that conversation too. Again, thank you guys for joining us. What's wrong, Sharon? Oh, her internet is horrible tonight. But anyway, thank you guys for joining us tonight. We appreciate it. We appreciate your insight. And you don't have anywhere. Sharon says some little quote at the end. I don't do this. So she says something about when you don't have a place to go, stay where you are, or something like that. But anyway, I've enjoyed the conversation. I want us to keep the conversation going. If you guys, even if it's not related to your book, but if you guys feel like you need a platform to have another conversation, we're here. Our audience, they tend to enjoy all types of conversations. So I think this is a great one.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Please have me come back.
All right. Thank you. And I appreciate you coming. It was a last minute invitation, but I thank you and I appreciate you for joining us tonight. We'll be back. Here's Sharon. Hold on.
Yeah, she may have something. Yeah, I actually would like to hear her sign off.
Yes. Okay. Sharon, are you back?
I'm sorry.
Okay. Can you do your sign off? Because I just messed it up.
Reading gives us someplace to go. We have nowhere to go. Be safe.
Yeah, I told y'all it was something like that. All right. So we do have next week's Arthur, and I am behind the scenes. Tell us again where the audience can get your book.
Where can your book be purchased, or you can be contacted?
Amazon.com. As of today, I'm working on getting it in Barnes and Noble. I'll have an official yes in about 30 days, but for right now, Amazon.com.
Awesome. All righty. Well, we conclude our show for today, and I'll go ahead and sign us off. Thank you guys again, and thank our listening audience for participating tonight. We appreciate you.
I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, sisters.